I'm Justin Silverman of the New England First Amendment Coalition. Thank you for joining us for this lesson on New England state courts. This lesson is the third in our series of classes discussing how the courts work and what types of access you're entitled to under the First Amendment, state law, and various court rules. Each lesson is cumulative, so if you haven't already, please view the previous two lessons. You can find them on our YouTube channel, Five Freedoms, or in our FOI guide at NEFAC.org. You'll also find there lessons on state public record and open meeting laws, as well as tutorials on how to use the Federal Freedom of Information Act. Collectively, these lessons provide a curriculum you won't find anywhere else. A special thanks to those who are supporting these classes and keeping them free and open to the public. The Rhode Island Foundation, SBJ New England, and the New England Society of News Editors. Now, to introduce you to today's instructor, NEFAC Executive Committee member and Boston Globe reporter, Emily Sweeney.
Hey everybody, I'm Emily Sweeney from the Boston Globe, and I want to thank you for joining us for this webinar, which is brought to you by the New England First Amendment Coalition. And now this session is going to focus on online access to state court documents in Massachusetts. And with us today is Todd Wallack from WBUR. Todd, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. I know that I've had so many conversations with journalists who have tried and run into problems trying to figure out how to use the state court system. So I'm hoping to make it a little bit easier to understand. This is my contact information. We'll make sure that the slides are available. And of course, this presentation is recorded, so you'll be able to watch it later if you've missed anything. And again, toss questions in the chat if anything I say doesn't make sense or you want more details. But most electronic state court documents and cases can be accessed using a website called masscourts.org. And some things to note: it is not always available. Right now, there's a warning about some features of land court not being available. I have found sometimes the site goes down for maintenance on weekends and nights. Sometimes it can be slow, so that's something to keep in mind. And there's a warning sign not to use, write a program that tries to download all the data automatically from the site, called scraping, and there's a CAPTCHA that you need to click. I'm not a robot in order to access the site, and click here to search public records. There's also a login feature that is for attorneys and people who work with attorneys. Attorneys with bar cards in Massachusetts have a login that gives them extra access to the site, and I'll mention that as we go along. One thing is that one of the first things after you say okay is that it will prompt you to select which court. There are more than 100 courthouses in Massachusetts. The BMC is the local courts in Boston, called Boston Municipal Court. The district courts are those local courts outside of Boston. Housing court, land court, probate, and superior court. The bigger cases are handled by superior court, so major felonies and civil cases involving large amounts of money. One thing is that you can only look at one courthouse at a time, at least if you are a mortal person like me and Emily. The court clerks have extra superpower access where they are able to search the entire court system, but regular people, even lawyers, can only search one court at a time. That means if you are trying to research a person and want to know, hey, does that person have a criminal record? That might mean searching dozens and dozens and dozens of courts to be sure. Often we'll search the most likely courts available, where they live, where they work, just because it can be really time consuming and slow to search every single district and superior court across the state. There's three main ways to find cases. One way is by searching the name, like Maura Healy, and the system doesn't support wildcards. You can fill out the first part of the name, but you need to type in a couple letters at least of the first and last name. So it's not as powerful a search as some people are used to with Google and Nexus and some other private tools. And names are sometimes spelled differently, so you might have to, or spelled wrong, so you might have to try a couple different ways. And when you type in a name like Aaron Hernandez, you should see, for civil cases, you should see names pop up. But however, if you are a regular person, and this is the search that an attorney would show, searching Aaron Hernandez in Bristol Court and Superior Court, but there are limitations searching by name. So you can only search by name in criminal cases if you have an attorney login. So you may need to find a friend who is an attorney to help you do that search, unless you're physically at the courthouse where anybody can do it. But online, it is limited to attorneys. You can also only search one courthouse at a time again, and you can only see the first 100 results, which can be hard. If you search with a name without an attorney login, you'll get really misleading results when you type in a name. So when I typed in Aaron Hernandez in Suffolk County, where he was prosecuted for murder, it shows no records found. There were records, as we just saw in that last slide. They exist. But if you are a regular person without an attorney login, you won't see any records. So that is very important, because I've had so many people say, gosh, I searched the court and I didn't see any cases at all, but they were searching criminal cases by name, and that's why nothing showed up. It would be great if the court said, sorry, you can't do this search because you don't have an attorney login, but instead it gives you misleading response that no records are found. Another way you can search is by date. And this is really useful if you know the approximate date when a case was filed, or you want to search recent cases. This will show all those cases. It will show most cases in that date range, regardless of whether you have an attorney login or not. So it's really helpful, particularly if you can't search by name for criminal cases. There are limits. You have to pick what types of cases, and you can only search 5 types of cases at a time. And there might be something like 13 types of cases in Superior Court. So you might have to do a couple different searches. You can only search a date range with 30 days or fewer. I've often mistakenly typed in larger date ranges and getting an error message. Again, you have to search one court at a time, and you can only see the first 100 results. I just did a date range search here that got 406 records, but I can only see the first 100. So that means I need to go back and narrow my search so that I can actually see all the records. And it can be really hard for a busy court like Boston Municipal Central, which handles a lot, probably more criminal cases than any other court in the state. When documents are available, you should see a little icon that marks image. Sometimes it's crossed out, and that means you might only be able to access it if you're an attorney, or sometimes nobody can access it. And often you won't see an image at all. So sometimes there are documents available and sometimes there aren't. One thing that is really important to note is Some types of cases only let attorneys see the documents. That's true for criminal cases on mass courts. If you don't have an attorney login, you have to go to the courthouse to actually download those, to actually see those documents. Also housing court and probate court, where divorces are usually handled, at least for many types of probate cases, the documents are only available with an attorney login. There are limits also to searching by date. I think I mentioned all these. Again, you can only search one court at a time. A third way to search is by docket number. So if you happen to know the case number, this is really helpful. There are some, for instance, this is an example of one case filed in Suffolk County's civil court. What I would recommend doing is, if there's ever a case you are interested in following, write down the docket number and save it, whether it's on a Google Doc or Word documents, some other place. If you want to share it with colleagues, you can have a shared document where you all fill in the key cases and the case number, because it is a pain to search and find cases, particularly for criminal cases, and limits by searching name. So keep track, and also keep track of the court where it's filed, because in addition to typing in the docket number, it also requires you to type in the court name. And beware with Suffolk, because Suffolk, unlike other superior courts, has both a civil case division and a criminal case division, and you have to select the right one. I'm going to explain the docket number a little more. So it has a formula. The first two digits of a docket number are the year that it was filed. So this case was filed in 2021. The next two digits are the number of the court, and all the courts are numbered with a code. And the code for, I think this is Suffolk Superior, is 84. But every court has its own code. The next two digits are the type of court case. The most common are CV for civil and CR for criminal. And the last 5 digits are the case number, which is always a 5-digit number. And the list of court ID numbers, those codes, is actually listed online. So number 1 is BMC Central, number 2 is Roxbury, and the courts have put that online, which can be helpful sometimes. There are tricks to using the docket number. So often I've typed in the docket number and it hasn't found the case for a bunch of reasons. One is I have to remember to enter the right court. So I can't put in a docket number for Suffolk Civil if it is, and type, and if I've selected Suffolk Criminal or Norfolk Superior or something else. The letters like CR and CV must be uppercase, otherwise it won't work. It has to end in 5 digits, not 3 or 4, even if it's listed on the court documents that way. And I often see docket numbers ending in 3 digits, like 1, 2, 3, or 4 digits. Mass courts, the court system, the online system, thinks that a docket number has to end in 5 digits. So you need to start with what are called leading zeros before the case number. And cases, by the way, go in consecutive order. So the first case would be 0001, filed each year in January, and then 0002, and so on. In some cases won't show up at all if they're sealed. Sometimes there's also a delay in entering it into the computer system that might take hours or a day. So those are some limits with using the docket number search. There are other limits to mass courts. One is for criminal cases, regular people can't see the docket, which is the list of every entry in a court case, or the calendar information, which shows when the next hearing is being scheduled, without an attorney login. By the way, this violates the court's own rules. The SJC rule approved court rule called Trial Court Rule 14 that says, with few exceptions, everyone is supposed to be able to access docket and calendar information for these cases. And I alerted the court system a couple weeks ago about this, and Jennifer Donahue, the PIO for the courts, essentially said they're working on a recommendation for how to address this. It was a very vague answer, but I just want to point out for the NEFAC audience, they're supposed to be making this available. They're not. So if you're looking up information on criminal cases in the meantime, you're probably going to have to find a friend who is an attorney or has an attorney login, or go to the courthouse itself, or call the clerks. And the clerks are sometimes annoyed by getting all these questions. But if you want to know when the next court hearing is scheduled in a criminal case, you can't look it up without an attorney login online. By contrast, if you have an attorney login, this is the type of thing that you will see for a criminal case. You will see when the hearings have been held, when the next hearing is, and you should see an entry for every case. Sometimes the documents are available, sometimes they're not. As in this case, there's no image available for some of these cases. So even attorneys would still have to go to the courthouse in person to access these documents. Without an attorney login, this is an example of what a regular person would see when they click on a case. They would see the name of the attorney. On a prior screen, you would have seen the charge. This is the case, by the way, against City Councilor Kendra Laura. So very high profile case that lots of journalists are interested in. And despite that, the court system shows almost no information about the case, not even when the hearing is scheduled. Hearing is scheduled in violation of the court's own rules. There are additional limits. So unfortunately, court documents themselves are generally only available for cases in more recent years. At some point, several years ago, the court started scanning documents and posting them online. But prior to that, they didn't. So again, we would have to go to the courthouse in person to get them. And even for more recent years, some documents aren't online. I've noticed that in many criminal cases, the initial complaint with the police report is often not scanned and posted online for reasons I don't understand. As I mentioned, you need an attorney login to access most documents in criminal, housing, and probate cases. And mass courts, as I said, is sometimes slow or completely unavailable at the times you need it most. There's some other notes I want to point out about mass courts. Again, court clerks can search the computer system in ways the public cannot, such as court-wide searches. And the administrative office of the trial court can search by attorney name and other ways that we can't. This isn't Google. We're very limited in the way that we can search. If you're interested in statistics, the court posts some statistics online, such as the number of cases or types of cases by courthouse. That can be really useful for some cases. You can also file a request for specialized statistics as a request for compiled data, and you can send it to Jennifer Donahue, the public information person for the courthouse at the administrative office of the trial court. Just look for a press release and you'll see contact information. The courts are actually exempt from the public records law, where, as you've undoubtedly heard, the only state where the judiciary, the legislature, and governor's office are entirely exempt from the public records law. So we can't force them to provide records, but their own court rules say they'll consider requests for statistics, which they call compiled data, on a case-by-case basis. Unfortunately, those same rules say they will never produce the raw data, if you want the full list of all the cases filed in a single courthouse or statewide, they will say no. They will say they don't provide what they call bulk data, which limits our access. If you are interested in an appeals court case, there's a separate website, ma-appellatecourts.org. The good news is this is much easier to use. You can search by last name, first name, you can search by docket number, you can search the calendar, and you don't need an attorney login, regardless of whether it's a criminal case. So it's a weird thing where if a criminal case is in Superior Court or District Court, you can only see the full information. If you're an attorney, if it's an appellate court, anybody can see it. I should add, the filings themselves are not always posted online. So you may still have to go to the appellate courthouse to see the filings, or you can also ask one of the attorneys involved if they would send it to you, some of the filings. And many attorneys are very helpful to journalists and will share those. So that is some of the basics. I think there's at least one question.
Yeah. One question came in while you were talking, Todd. One of our live audience members is wondering, can you describe the types of documents that are generated in criminal cases that clerks typically provide if asked?
Yes. So I can actually try loading up a typical case while we're here. All right, so this is an example of a case of a public records case filed by the Boston Globe against the city of Boston. And off to the right, you'll see a bunch of images. So when I click on them, I will see an example of the complaint. So one of the most basic things that you'll see in court cases, and they are often available online, but not always, and clerks should give it to you in person, is if it's a civil case or criminal case, the initial complaint. What is somebody accused of? You should also be able to see motions that people have filed in a case. Attorney appearances, back and forth in court cases, there are different motions where people are asking a judge to do different things. One thing that is also usually available online and you can also get in person is the court's order, and they usually type them up. In this case, the Globe partially won this court case where it's alleged Boston wasn't providing documents. The judge disagreed with some of the remedies the Globe suggested to address it, but agreed the city failed the law and was wrongfully ignoring requests from the Globe. What is available can vary based on the type of case. For instance, if it is a case involving juvenile court, it's usually closed to the public. In divorce cases, most records are available, but there are a few records that are confidential, like there's one document, I forget what it's called, that lists the finances of the parties. That is typically closed to the public. But most documents are presumed to be public. There are also cases where judges can seal particular documents. That is supposed to happen only in rare cases, and journalists have often been successful in challenging it. Again, the bulk of documents that you see on a docket should be publicly available. It is the exception when they are not. There are also documents, I should note, that you won't find in mass courts, but are available only in a courthouse. One example is search warrants. So in criminal cases, police generally need a judge's or clerk's approval in order to search somebody's house or search somebody's phone. And those search warrants are not on mass courts. You would have to go in person to request. Another example is applications and copies of restraining orders. Those are also something generally available only in public. I'm sorry, only in the courthouse. And another type of case that unfortunately is only available in certain circumstances is documents for what are called clerk magistrate hearings or show cause hearings. That's the beginning of most criminal cases where police present a case to a clerk and say, we want to issue criminal charges. And for misdemeanors and some other cases where there hasn't been an arrest, a defendant is entitled to a hearing. Those hearings are closed and all the court documents are secret unless the clerk decides to issue criminal charges. And once that happens, the records become publicly available. You won't find them again on mass courts, but they are publicly available if you go to the courthouse, except some documents may subsequently be filed in the criminal case that comes after the clerk magistrate hearing.
And Todd, we have one more question.
Sure.
Another audience member who asks if there are records that should be public, but they're not, and a clerk has to print it out for you, is it legitimate to have to pay for those copies?
So one thing is, under the court rules, you are generally entitled to bring your phone into a clerk's office and take pictures of the documents. There are some clerks who will give you a hard time about it. The other good news is the court rules say that they can only charge 5 cents a page. Many years ago, it used to be $1 a page. And so it was really expensive if you wanted to copy a lot of documents. Now it's far cheaper. You can get 20 pages for $1. So I generally don't object to paying if I have to, but you do have the right under the court rules to take a phone and scan them. They can limit access to a scanner depending on how large it is. But most phones have apps that you can download that are sort of like digital scanners that will take PDFs, which are even faster and more readable than pictures. But either way, that is an option available.
Todd, thank you so much for taking the time to walk us through this.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to do it, Emily.
So, all right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in, and until next time.